Hi, and thanks for joining us for this video where we'll be exploring a simple but powerful framework that has helped countless individuals empower their decision making and experience significantly improved outcomes. But before we delve into the framework, let's just stop for a moment and consider why this topic is important. If we're going to shift our results, we need to realise that there are certain factors which we can control and others outside of our control. A lot of people find themselves focusing on the wrong components, and as a result, they limit their progress. All of us at some point in time have experienced unexpected challenges that have left us feeling angered, perhaps fearful, disempowered, or even overwhelmed. You know, recent events following the COVID-19 crisis are a perfect example of such circumstances. For many, the compounding nature of the environmental conditions quickly led to a feeling of panic as they were confronted by potential threat to their lives, restrictions to personal freedom, financial impact to the economy, and even to themselves personally. We had many folk who responded from the old brain. They adopted attitudes that were reflective of survival-based instincts, whilst others responded in a far more conservative manner, deciding to wait for further insight before making hasty decisions. But at the same time, we also had some folk who were excited by the change in markets, quickly identifying opportunity where others saw doom and peril. Now, which group were you a part of? Look, without doubt, the majority of us would like to be in that latter group, able to take advantage of the situation rather than reacting defensively. But all too commonly, people find themselves faced with constraints that limit them from being able to do so at the very moment in time when these opportunities arise. Why is it that some people seem to constantly come out on top, whilst others constantly come out on bottom? Both confronted with the same set of circumstances, yet experiencing wildly different outcomes. Sure, there may be factors such as personal wealth, who they know, insight they have, etc., but not everyone has such an advantage at hand. It's been widely reported that the world has more multi-millionaires per capita than it ever has, and that has more to do with the opportunities at hand and less to do with simple principles of economy, such as inflation. The real catalyst is in the thinking. Now, before interpreting that as meaning education, whilst that does play a role in decision making, it's often far more rudimentary than that. And because that's the case, it stands to reason that if we're able to reverse engineer the thinking process of high achievers and apply it to ourselves, we too should begin experiencing far more resourceful outcomes in the areas we apply this to. In our video on the anatomy and function of the human brain, we covered the fundamental principles of the neurological responses which are triggered by external stimuli and how we tend to interpret those stimuli as part of our human experience. Now, without a doubt, we're in a day and an age where not only do we need to be familiar with how we are being triggered, we also need to be familiar with effective strategies that can assist in helping us move forward. Whilst there are many different frameworks that we could explore, there are a few simple ones which really help move us beyond reactive thinking to an informed response without overcomplicating matters. Now, we need to also be able to firstly acknowledge that our current manner of thinking has largely been responsible for the outcomes we've had in our lives. I'm not saying that the circumstances we face nor the people we come in contact with don't impact our experience. What I am saying is that the meaning we attribute to these experiences is reflective of how we choose to react or respond. I get that even this is a somewhat confronting statement for some, but bear with me and I'll explain what I mean by this. Look, most everyone at some point in their lives will come to a place where they'll have to ask themselves some hard questions, where the environment, relationships, self-worth will come into question and decisions will need to be made. These points in our lives are defining moments when the decisions we make, they really do determine the course of our lives. They are also moments in time where we can either stay locked in narrow-mindedness or we can muster up enough courage to move through our fear. They are what I like to refer to as dragon-slaying moments. Now, drawing from my own personal experience, in the past there were memes that kept repeating themselves. I used to care far too much for people's opinions of me, oftentimes refraining from challenging the status quo. But as I matured as a business leader, the expectation and responsibility for clear, decisive action meant that I needed to grow beyond these limitations. I had heard the quote attributed to Albert Einstein that the problems we face cannot be solved by the same level of thinking that created them, and it was something that resonated with me. I needed a different perspective. That shift in perspective came from understanding two simple models. The first came as a result of my exposure to the work of American psychologist Carol Dweck and her contribution to social psychology in the area of implicit theories of intelligence. Now, her 2006 book, Mindset, expanded the principles of the fixed and growth mindset. But what are fixed and growth mindsets and how do they impact us? With a fixed mindset, intelligence is static. People with a fixed mindset tend to avoid challenges. They give up easily. They see effort as a waste. They ignore negative feedback, even if it's useful, and feel threatened by the success of others. As a result, they tend to plateau early in life and have a deterministic outlook. Now, conversely, people with a growth mindset see intelligence as something that can be developed. They embrace challenges and persist through them. They see effort as essential. They learn from criticism and find lessons and inspiration in the success of others. As a result, they continue to grow throughout their entire lives and have a greater sense of free will. It's worth mentioning that we can fluctuate between the two mindsets depending on the area of life we're approaching. More importantly, not only is our ability to recognise when we are experiencing a fixed mindset response so that we can move into a place of growth, but is also the choice in and around that. Look, simply having a positive attitude about what we're experiencing isn't enough to make a noticeable difference, at least not immediately. Or is it? Look, there has been studies in and around optimism, a growth mindset, having major psychological benefits, but the research papers published in the Proceedings of National Academy of Science suggest that optimism is specifically related to 11 to 15% longer lifespans and greater odds of achieving exceptional longevity, that is, living beyond the age of 85. But more than that stands the importance of understanding how to quickly classify the decisions we are making, and at the very least have a macro awareness of the outcomes we can anticipate. It stands to reason that if we have multiple models that overlap each other, we can determine with reasonable accuracy where our results will lie. One such additional framework that overlaps Carol Dweck's fixed and growth mindset is the 4 levels of decision making. The following framework was taught to me by Sharon Pearson, the founder of the Coaching Institute Australia. And this framework is incredibly simple, but powerful in assisting us to quickly and effectively make decisions that will move us from the unresourceful to the resourceful, should we choose, of course. Now, level 1 decisions are decisions that are made around certainty, where there is competency. They are resourceful in nature, where perhaps you already have a level of mastery or you're on your way to mastery. They're the decisions that feel good. They're good for you, they're good for others, and they're good for the greater good. Now, whilst these decisions are extremely resourceful and indicate successful decision making, it is part of our human condition that if we spend too much time only in level 1 decision making, the lack of growth will lead to a decline. And level 1 decisions can also be known as being ripe. Level 2 decisions, unlike level 1, are based around uncertainty. Level 2 decisions are made around goals that we set for ourselves or others, and those decisions don't necessarily feel good, but they're good for you, they're good for others, and they're good for the greater good. Now, whenever we start a new thing, whether it be personal or professional, where the intended outcome is ecologically beneficial, we engage in level 2 decision making. Level 2 decision making is also known as green and growing. Level 3 decisions, much like level 1 decisions, are based around certainty. They do feel good, but they're not good for you. They're not good for others, and they're not good for the greater good. Look, an example of this would be some sort of activity like overeating or drug or alcohol abuse, excessive promiscuity, putting yourself at risk, hoarding, etc. Those decisions that individuals have created for themselves as a method of coping with unresolved internal conflicts. It's also known as being ripe and rotting. Level 4 decisions, like level 2 decisions, are based around uncertainty. Level 4 decisions do not feel good, they're not good for you, they're not good for others, and they're not good for the greater good. Look, an example of this type of decision making would be alcoholism or drug addiction. Level 4 decisions occur when the coping mechanism utilised in that level 3 decision making process has imploded upon itself, and now it's become core. So level 4 decisions are commonly the place where the threshold's reached. Level 4 decisions are decisions which indicate that the individual is heading towards catastrophic outcomes. An example of level 4 decisions would be a social drinker who progressively leans upon the use of alcohol to help cope with unresolved internal conflict, rather than addressing these resourcefully. Look, over time, the dependency on alcohol may lead to the loss of meaningful relationships, employment, or worse. But now the behaviour has become an addiction which persists. Level 4 decisions are decisions that are also known as being rotten. So to summarise, Level 1 decisions feel good, they're good for you, they're good for others, and they're good for the greater good. Level 2 decisions do not feel good, but are ultimately good for you, good for others, and good for the greater good. Level 3 decisions feel good, but are bad for you. They're bad for others, and they don't contribute towards a greater good. Level 4 decisions are bad all around. They feel bad, they're bad for you, they're bad for others, and they do not contribute towards a greater good. The quality of the life we have will depend on the quantity of level 1 experiences we accrue. However, they are not the determining factor around our feeling of self-worth. This is because in order to remain relevant, we must continue to expand. This is why only 20% of our time should be spent in this quadrant. In order to experience phenomenal success, the other 80% should be spent on level 2 decisions and experiences. The more level 2 decisions we make and experiences we have, the more success will follow. This is because the more comfortable we are with uncertainty, the easier it becomes to make resourceful decisions when presented with opportunities. Level 2 decisions and activities are the doorway to results, and it all starts with us building sufficient reference points of how we can trust ourselves to grow through the unknown. So where have you been spending your time and effort? And having now a conscious awareness of the effectiveness of your decisions, what do you need to stop doing, start doing, stop being, start being, in order for you to experience the success you truly desire?